Welcome, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
We always start the On the Way Home show with the question, what does home mean to you? I know that you've been on the show before, so maybe tell us, has anything changed or evolved since you last shared, or otherwise what it means to you today?
Yeah, that was a long time ago. It's good you reminded me of that. But yeah, I think the show had a different name back then as well. But yeah, I was thinking about the question again about what home means to me, and I think honestly it's evolved over time. I think when I was a young person, it was about being wherever I needed to be, right? And it was, I was going to university, I was living downtown, I needed to be close to wherever I was working, close to the action, my friends, what have you. And I think it was about serving your needs as a young person, and certainly maybe didn't have that permanence that that people often attach to home. I think certainly as I've gotten older and had a family, and it's become very different. I think it is now for us. It's about stability. It's about a safe place to live. It's a place where our kids grew up, and I don't want to digress here, but I was fortunate. Not because I did anything clever, but I was just of the age where the last home I bought was 25 years ago. So I actually bought a home when they were affordable. So I feel very grateful for that. But as I say, I think the concept of home has evolved for me over the years.
And so you've spent more than 30 years in the not-for-profit housing and homelessness sector, and you've led major organizations across Toronto. What first drew you to this work, and what continues to motivate you today, especially when it comes to supporting young people? I noticed you went right there, even in terms of your definition of home. That's the first thing on your mind. Tell us more about your journey.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a social work background. I don't have a clinical background. After I graduated from the University of Toronto, I tried a few different things for a couple of years, a few years. And I think it was actually volunteerism that led me to the sector. I volunteered for it's actually a sort of ministry-sponsored program, but it was around working with young people who'd had interaction with the criminal justice system, and arranging weekend trips for them, accompanying them, all of those types of things. So I really enjoyed that work. I did some volunteer work with some international development organizations as well in Toronto. And yeah, I think it was a match for who I was, what I enjoyed, my values, and that led to me looking for work in the sector. And I ended up working in supportive housing for people with physical disabilities. And that was the first job I had, and really different. I'd never done anything like that. It challenged me, sort of stretched me. But again, I felt a real sort of deep resonance for the mission and the values. And 35 years later, it's the same thing. When I come into work at Covenant House, I'm coming into work with people who I think hold similar values, striving for similar things. And at Covenant House, our mission and purpose, I think, is so important. We're about really protecting the potential of young people. Homelessness can erode and diminish a young person's potential and their aspirations and dreams as well. And so our work here at Covenant House is to work with young people to ensure that doesn't happen. So, and there are so many compelling success stories as well. So I think that's just, it's kept me really engaged in the work.
Incredible. And from your perspective, how is youth homelessness fundamentally different from adult homelessness, both in terms of causes and the kinds of support young people need?
Yeah, I was sort of mulling this over and thinking that, it's intuitive in a sense, right? Because like a 19-year-old and a 50-year-old are at very different stages of life. They have different needs, different interests, different ambitions and dreams, and they don't have the same capabilities either necessarily, right? At 19, as I said, I'm not a clinician, but I know that, in your late teens and early 20s, the brain is still developing, right? Significant difference. Most people of 19, if they end up homeless, it's because of conflict with family, right? Young people may not have the life skills that they need to live independently in a very fundamental, basic sense. I was visiting one of our off-site housing locations some months back, and a housing worker there told me a story of this young person who just didn't have basics. He'd taken this whole economy pack of frozen chicken and thrown it into a pot of boiling water. Anyway, but I'm not laughing at it because, I can tell you my kids were kind of similar at a certain age, right? So, young people often will not have the skills they need without some assistance and help. Sometimes they're struggling with transition, leaving foster care, leaving, the child welfare system, and suddenly being asked to be independent without adequate transitional support. Maybe they haven't completed an education or set into a career pathway. So, all of that says to me that the circumstances for young people and their needs are very, very different from adults who are experiencing homelessness, and in turn, they need different types of services.
Do you find that the services then are that it's easier to course correct if you support youth right away?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question. I think research would say that the sooner that you can get the type of supports to a young person that they need, the sooner you can provide them a safe environment, a home to live in again, the less harm comes to them. So I think the timeliness of the intervention is critical. As you know, Emmy, the big push to prevent youth homelessness, to work upstream, and get solutions to young people who are at risk or in crisis actually before they become homeless. I think are all critical issues. But I think young people, for example, at Covenant House, the gym is, well, we're not using it for the winter respite, which I can talk about, but the gym and the sports teams are heavily engaged with and used, right?
Right.
Young people have energy to burn, enthusiasm, and they need that type of programming, social, recreational, sports. I'm not saying that's not also something that could benefit adults, but to me, it's more acute at those younger ages.
And we saw you in the news talking about the youth homelessness crisis right now in Toronto. Can you tell us a little bit about what youth homelessness looks like in Toronto right now and what you and your team at Covenant House are seeing on the ground?
Yeah, it's been a difficult couple of years. I mean, the last street needs assessment or point in time count that was done in Toronto showed over 15,000 people homeless on that point in time count night. Of those, about 10% are young people. So that's 1,500 young people who were registered in the system, either in shelters or were interacted, engaged with sleeping rough or in encampments. So that's a big number, but again, as you know, it doesn't include hidden homelessness, those young people who are in really precarious circumstances. So even that is probably a very conservative number. Just a couple of weeks ago, I think there was an update on the Association of Ontario Municipalities report on homelessness, and they said in the last year, people experiencing homelessness in Ontario was up to 84,000, right? Almost, I think about 50% of that number experiencing chronic homelessness. 25% of that group are children and youth. So now we've got 25% of our chronic homeless population, under the age of 25, right? So it's tough times. There are lots of factors that are driving that. But at Covenant House, our crisis shelter is full, our transitional housing is full. We've opened a winter respite program in our gym, which is full. There are 30 cots in there now for young people who have nowhere else to go. The mayor visited, Mayor Chow visited a couple of years back when the respite program first opened, and she had a conversation with a couple of people. One young man, the first question she asked him was, well, where were you staying before you came to the respite? And he said, I was sleeping in the park, and he sort of pointed over his shoulder. So, really underlines the point that sleeping on cots in a gym maybe isn't ideal, but it's a lot safer, warmer, and you've got a supportive community there as compared to sleeping in the park, sleeping in an encampment, or sleeping rough somewhere else. So, I mean, that's the tough end of the message, is that there's a lot of pressure on the system, particularly in Toronto, but I think that's happening across the province now. I think if you're looking for where the hope is and positivity, it's particularly with youth homelessness. It's about the new programs that we're digging into, providing for young people that really show great hope. Whether that's working in schools, or it's diversion from shelter, or it's specialized housing first for youth units, all of those types of things are really achieving good outcomes. But as I say, the environment is tough.
Maybe take us there for a minute, because you and your team at Covenant House play a very unique role in the city's response to youth homelessness. Could you walk us through what that role looks like and how your programs meet youth where they're at?
Sure. And firstly, I would say that I'm really grateful for the community of agencies in Toronto that support youth who are experiencing homelessness, and we're part of that sector. And we've done a lot collaboratively over the last couple of years to work together, and maybe we can sort of talk a little bit about that. But Covenant House is the largest youth serving agency in Toronto. I think we account for about 30% of the shelter beds in the city. And essentially our programs break into three main buckets. There's sort of prevention, working upstream or at the point of homelessness to try and prevent a young person from an extended stay, either sleeping rough or in a shelter, to reconnect them with supports they may have in the community and so forth. Then there's the sort of emergency intervention work, right? Access to healthcare, mental health supports, shelter, food, clothing, hygiene, on-site clinic, all of those types of things. And then there are the services that help a young person really reestablish themselves, get their life back on the track that they want it to be on. So that's employment, training services, education. We have an on-site charter school. And obviously it's about housing opportunities in the community as well. And making sure that you have a range of opportunities, because young people don't all need the same thing. So that's kind of an overview of Covenant House services. But I think a couple of points I'd make. We really, I think this organization has tried to be responsive to changing needs. It's no good, going, we've always done this. It worked 30 years ago, keep doing it. And I think most agencies are like that, but I'm particularly proud of the work Covenant House has done in that regard over the last 5 years. An example is we've seen a large influx of young people who are refugees into the system, and they don't really need the same things as some other youth. In fact, what they needed was a little bit of stability and some help with integration to get on their feet, get their first job, and they're away, and some affordable housing, at least for a time-limited period. So we've created a couple of programs, Thrive and Madison House, that now support 65, 75 young refugees in the community. And again, great outcomes coming out of those programs, because those young people, they're really ready to go. They want to work, they want to be independent, they just needed that little help. So
is that like a rolling basis, you're saying? Like 65 on a rolling basis, you're just constantly helping?
Capacity in those programs, they're transitional programs, transitional residential programs. They can support up to 75 young people. One is sort of an apartment style, low rise. The other is a large house, but both converted, have sort of amenity space on site, 24/7 staffing. And they're far better environments for young newcomers than traditional shelter environments. So we're really pleased with that. We've really leaned into clinical services as well, and that's out of necessity. Mental health challenges amongst young people are really significant. I think that the pandemic certainly didn't help, and the isolation and anxiety that caused. But the continual stress of trying to afford food and an apartment in an unaffordable city really takes a toll on young people's mental health as well. And then obviously there's the drug poisoning overdose crisis that impacts young people as well. So again, the needs in that area have intensified, and while it's difficult, we've tried to respond by having a variety of clinical staff who are able to respond in real time to the needs of young people, and when they don't have the expertise, to refer them to psychiatrists, physicians, and so forth.
I'm interested the things that you're sharing about newcomer youth who just kind of need that connection to move forward with employment and all of that. Have you kind of looked at or thought about, is it systemic challenges that are driving some of the differences in what youth that have been born and raised in Canada are facing versus what a newcomer, like, what's the difference there? Is it something that we can improve on as a nation? Have you thought about that? Or is it a byproduct of, let's say, some of the substances you're talking about? Or
yeah, I mean, I'm generalizing here, but often while there are mental health and addiction challenges among newcomer refugee youth. Our experience has been it hasn't been quite as prevalent as the remaining homeless youth population. So that's a significant difference. And because it isn't so prevalent, it means more of those young people are able to engage quickly if they have the opportunity with the labor market, with education and so forth. Obviously, there are young people who are new to the country who have those issues, and then, like everyone else, they need the supports that they need to really stabilize them, help them. So it's not that they can't move into the labor market or pick up their education, but they need to get their health supports in place first. So it's just a longer process. But we sort of realized that and said, look, the type of more intensive supports that happen on our main site aren't needed by 80% of these young people. They can simply flow through into the community. And if they get some supports around sort of ID, education, employment, all of those types of things, that they can succeed. And I have to tell you, Emmy, your picture is just oh, okay, you came back, all right.
It was acting up a little bit, but
Okay.
fixed now.
Strange things happening on the computer today.
So you were also co-founder of the Toronto Alliance to End Homelessness, and you have been leading system change initiatives across the city. Where do you think the biggest gaps still are in how we're responding to youth homelessness?
Yeah, I think, I think that homelessness, certainly if you look back over the last sort of quarter century, has 25 years has tended to lump people a little too much, aggregate them. You're homeless, this is what you need. Where I think now it's changed, like, for sure, right? I mean, look at the City of Toronto shelter standards that recognize that Black identified folks using the shelter system sometimes need different supports, right? Likewise, LGBTQ2S+ and so forth. But that hasn't always been the case. And I think, with youth, I honestly don't think they've got the attention that is needed, right? As I mentioned, I think that youth homelessness is significantly different. The types of programs, supports and interventions they need is very different. We have a situation in Toronto where, I would estimate that at least a couple of hundred young people, if not more, a night are using the adult system, right? Because there aren't sufficient youth shelter beds. I haven't got an update on that recently, but certainly about a year ago that was the case. I think it still is. So it might work for some of them, but I would say in general, probably not getting services that are specifically tailored to their needs. I also think there's an issue of really putting resources and capacity at the youth issue, and particularly youth housing options. I'd like to see a lot more attention to the needs of young people from the federal government, from the provincial government, from our city when it comes to housing strategy. Right? So I think those are a couple of things where I'm hopeful that over the next couple of years we're going to see positive change.
And then following the Toronto's Youth Summit, I believe there was a report put out and several recommendations were put forward to better address youth homelessness. Could you share what were some of the key recommendations and why they're so important right now?
Yeah, the summit was a really good event. Again, it was a collaborative effort. Youth Without Shelter, EVA's, Friends of Ruby, the YMCA, Covenant House, CAMH. There were a lot of folks who supported pulling together a youth summit. And the best thing about this summit was that young people really were at the center of it. There were pre-consultations that spoke to young people and said, hey, like, what should we be doing here? What do you want to achieve? So they really built the whole day. And I think we had about 150 people attend, and of those, almost 100 were young people. So we sort of had the atrium and council chambers. So all the young people got to sit where the councillors usually sit. And I think one young person sat in the mayor's chair and was happy about that. So, but no, it was really good. There were breakout sessions, plenary sessions. Some things I take from the day, that so many young people spoke about alienation, racism, discrimination, feeling isolated, and basically in plain language, like not having enough people on their side, right? I mean, it's quite shocking when you hear that, not from one person, but from a lot of young people. This is their experience. Like, I mean, it's trite and cliche, but young people are our future. And, if we're not supporting them and looking after them, I don't know what the heck we're doing as a city, as a society, as a province. So, some tough points were made by the young people. What came out of it, I think, was some really workable strategies. The first thing young people said is, hey, we don't need the same things as adults, which is what we've been talking about. So let's ask the City of Toronto for a youth-specific strategy, right? Let's ask for an allocation of housing units, like 10% of every new unit to be allocated to young people. I think another recommendation was let's really look at scaling up some of the services and programs that we know work, like diversion, family and natural supports that helps young people reconnect with family, extended family, community. And let's look at ways to embed those services across the whole youth shelter system in Toronto, and really shift organizations, including us, to provide the best services they can to young people. Young people spoke about partnerships. They want employment and training opportunities like Construct. I'm just thinking that's a great example of what we need more of, right? So many young people are enthusiastic about work, right? And so many of them can't quite find the road in that is right for them. So it was a really good day. Very pleased to have Councillor Moyes out there supporting us. But it yielded some really actionable recommendations in a report that is available. So,
where can we find that report?
Covenant House website.
Okay, I'm interested to hear what the youth might have said about their needs in housing. Did it extend beyond the affordability?
Yeah, I mean, it did. Affordability is a big deal. And people talked about, how do I go to school and pay rent? Like, I can only work part-time hours of 15 hours a week. It doesn't add up, right? So affordability was a big deal. But people also spoke about access to housing and how they felt. Some young people felt they'd been discriminated against, for a whole variety of reasons, that they didn't have credit histories as young people. So landlords were less willing to rent them units. they also spoke about, the types of environments that they were comfortable in. And, young people, as I said, young people from my 6 years at Covenant House and listening to young people, they're interested in different types of housing arrangements. Like, lots of young people move out of Covenant House and get a house and share it. Like 4 of them split the rent, and somehow that makes it affordable. Or they split a 2-bedroom apartment. They're interested in co-living arrangements like Madison House that I was talking about. Each big old house, you each get your own bedroom. There's 3-4 bathrooms, and you share a living room, breakfast, kitchen area, and the backyard. So those types of things were emphasized as well. But again, people said, hey, look, decision makers, pay attention to the needs of young people and make sure that those needs are accounted for when you design housing programs and fund them.
And Mark, just to tap into your leadership approach, which, those who know it's grounded in respect and compassion and unconditional love. How do these values shape the way Covenant House supports youth who are rebuilding their lives?
Yeah, when I was going through the interview process for Covenant House, and I was interested in, again, working with young people. I'm CEO at Fred Victor, and Fred Victor focuses mainly, or used to, on adults and families. But anyway, in that research I was doing, I came across sort of the mission statement of unconditional love and absolute respect. And I'm going, well, that's different, right? You don't sort of hear that too much. But as I got to think about it, I thought, well, it's pretty darn good, right? I mean, these are aspirational, right? They're touch, they're ideals that people, I think, at Covenant House genuinely aspire to. They're touchstones too. I think when you get kind of a bit confused about what you're doing, you can think about that. Is this program respecting young people? Is this requirement respecting young people? Is the way I approach that conversation respectful to that young person? So I think it's really positive in that sense. And I think you've got to look at how you define unconditional love and absolute respect as well. And that was certainly my learning and thinking when I came to Covenant House. What's unconditional love? Well, where I landed was it's really about seeing somebody as they should be seen, for the whole person, everything that they are, everything they can be, not just the crisis that they may be in the day you meet them. And so I think people are challenged to figure out what it means for them, right? So I think as staff and volunteers at Covenant House, we certainly strive to meet those ideals, struggle with them, and have a lot of conversations about them. But I think they're a real asset to the organization. And if I can say so, I think it makes us a little different.
Yeah, I'm sure hugely. So no judgment based on behaviors, but understanding the person and that individual and meeting them where they're at, which is an amazing lesson. And so I'll ask, after more than 30 years in this work, would you say that's the lesson that youth have taught you? Or is there another lesson that youth have taught you that continues to shape how you lead and how you show up in the sector?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I read that, I wasn't really sure what I was going to say. I mean, one of the things the Covenant House youth have taught me is that I'm not as good a soccer player as I thought I was, because many of them run circles around me. But leaving the joking aside, staff and youth often play sports together. And when you do that, I'm not the executive director or CEO, I'm just that guy who's on the other team, and they're not clients, they're just either on your team or they're on the opposing team. And, you kind of all want the same things, to have some fun, to hang out, to talk. Winning is great. Learning to lose graciously is more difficult, but also important. And, when I speak to young people, playing soccer or just walking through the house that I do every day, I'm always struck by like how reasonable and modest what they're asking for is. Like, I'd like a job that I kind of feel good about. I like to be able to pay my bills. I like being able to see my friends. I'd like to have a place to live, a home. And, just generally to sort of have the basics of life and feel good about yourself. And I think, is that too much for a young person to ask, right? It's not. In fact, it's really hard to hear at points. But, I wrote down these three things about what young people have taught me at Covenant House. Be positive, be joyful, be humble. So I've got lessons in all three of those things from young people at Covenant House. And, I'm very grateful for that.
Be positive, be joyful, be humble. Love that. Do you still play soccer with everyone now?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, I got tackled and broke my toe about a year ago.
Oh God.
I'm still in sort of a bit of, so yeah, I'm this summer I might be back, but yeah.
When was the last time you won?
My soccer career is coming to an end, right?
Oh no.
Age catches up with you, so.
Mark, for listeners who want to make a difference, whether as community members, donors, advocates, nonprofit leaders, frontline staff, what are the most meaningful ways we can support efforts to prevent and end youth homelessness?
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways. I'll mention three. I think firstly, volunteerism. I really believe it's where I started in the not-for-profit sector, but I believe that's crucial to every not-for-profit. So find an organization that helps young people in your area, and 10 to 1, they'll have a volunteer program that you can get involved with. Covenant House has a huge volunteer. We have like 150, 200 volunteers. And we have like a monthly calendar with everything from chess, storytelling, acting, martial arts. Like, this is all people come in and use their expertise and ability and help young people. So, volunteer. Advocacy. And like, that's not like, you don't need to be like a professional advocate. You don't need to be a public policy expert. It's about making your opinions about things that are important to you known to your local councillor, to your MPP, to your MP. So if you're concerned about the issue of youth homelessness, tell them that. Tell them what you'd like to see happen. If you see young people on the street, anybody, tell those decision makers, it's not acceptable that we don't have to have a society where people don't have anywhere to go. And make them know that you are really firm about that, and that you expect action. So I think people like, sure, you can depute at City Hall, you can write letters, but you can call up constituency offices, and they really listen to people who vote, citizens. And I think finally, I would just say, whatever your means are, if you're able, donate to a not-for-profit in your area, right? There are lots of youth-serving agencies across the GTA, across Toronto. I mean, if you're north and in Vaughan, there's 360 Kids. I know Blue Door does some great work with young people. If you're living in more the downtown area of Toronto, there's obviously Covenant House, but if you're out west, there's Youth Without Shelter, there's Friends of Ruby downtown, there's Eva's. So there's a wide scope of agencies that you can donate to. So those are three ways I think you can get involved and make a real difference.
Mark, is there anything else that you want to tell the listeners before we end this episode that you might not have gotten to share?
No, I'm just thank you very much for the invite. Thank you for the interest in the issues young people are facing in youth homelessness. And I really, commend Blue Door, yourself, and the podcast On the Way Home for doing this work and bringing so many issues and perspectives to people's attention. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you for the work you're doing for young people, not just in Toronto, but beyond. And thank you for being here. Thank you for the work you and your team do every day. We really do appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience with us, your perspective, and also your hope for the future of Canada with us today. We're all hopeful, and we do, like you said, we do want better, and we should speak up for better as well. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
You're welcome. Cheers. Bye.
Take care. So that brings us to the end of today's episode of On the Way Home. I'm deeply grateful to Mark Aston, CEO of Covenant House Toronto, for sharing his perspective, honesty, and decades of experience supporting young people. Youth homelessness is complex, but today's conversation reminds us that solutions are possible when we listen to youth, lead with compassion, and commit to long-term systemic change. If this episode resonated with you, we encourage you to learn more, get involved, and consider how you can support efforts to prevent and end youth homelessness in your own community, whether through advocacy, volunteering, or giving. Thank you for listening, for caring, and for being part of the journey. Until next time, this has been On the Way Home, a podcast brought to you by Blue Door.